Is Malik Nabers in your starting lineup this week, or are you scrambling because one of your main wide receivers has a bye or a tough matchup? Either way, I've got you covered with my top wide receiver streamers for Week 11 players who could deliver solid fantasy production even if they're under the radar. All of these options are started in fewer than half of ESPN.com leagues, so there's plenty of opportunity to gain an edge. Quentin Johnston is an intriguing option this week against the Jaguars. He didn't light up the scoreboard last week, scoring just over 9 fantasy points, but he saw 10 targets, and with Jauan Jennings banged up, that number could climb. The Jaguars' defense has been generous to opposing perimeter receivers, giving up 10 touchdowns and the second most fantasy points per game in that category. Johnston could easily see a big bump in production here. Jauan Jennings has been building momentum and is worth considering against the Cardinals. He scored 14-plus fantasy points in each of his last 2 games and has seen at least 7 targets in 3 of his last 4 contests. While the matchup against Arizona isn't ideal on paper, NFC West games often turn into shootouts, and Jennings is heavily involved in his team's passing attack. He could surprise this week with a strong output. Romeo Doubs is another option to monitor, especially against the Giants. After a quiet game last week, Doubs benefits from facing a defense that has allowed 13 wide receivers to reach at least 14 fantasy points this season, with 5 exceeding 20. New York also ranks 9th in points allowed to perimeter receivers, making Doubs a viable start for anyone looking for upside at the position. Tre Tucker has emerged as the Raiders' de facto number 1 wide receiver after Jakobi Meyers was traded. He draws an excellent matchup against the Cowboys, who have given up the most fantasy points per game to perimeter receivers. 9 different wideouts have scored 15 or more points against them this season, making Tucker a high upside play this week. Finally, Parker Washington continues to see volume and should be on your radar despite a tough matchup against the Chargers. He's racked up nearly 35 fantasy points over the last 2 games thanks to injuries to Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. Washington has seen 26 targets in his last 3 games, and that kind of consistent involvement can overcome a challenging defensive matchup. For fantasy managers looking to stream wide receivers in Week 11, these 5 players all have the potential to deliver solid points and give your lineup a boost. Whether you need a replacement or just want to capitalize on a favorable matchup, these options provide both upside and opportunity to climb in your league standings.